G'day and welcome to 2025 on David Joshua Live. It's really great to have you back here for another year. I wanted to kick off the year and take a little bit of a look at upgrading the studio because I've got a lot of things planned to upgrade from what I've got currently. So currently 4U rack upgrading to a 16U rack, so we can go over that today. And I just wanted to take you through some of the design process that I'm thinking for the audio and for the video components, partly to keep it portable, but also because this is my sort of permanent studio rack here when it's in Refilmery studio. So I need this to be working in this space as well as easy to take it on the road. If you're new on the channel, drop a line, say hi, say where you're joining from in this new year. And if you have any questions about live streaming, photography, video production, I'd be happy to answer them. So I might just kick off with the first part and I want to take a look at planning for a rack and some of the things that I've been weighing up, things like size versus weight, and whether you're going to be traveling locally versus getting on a flight. And it's really, the options are really variable. So you really need to think through your use case scenario. For me in this studio, most of the time it is living here in the corner. Let's see if I can bring up a shot of this there we go. And this is a 4U rack that I've got, which is starting to become a bit of a bird's nest with all of these cables, but that has been serving me pretty well. And then I've been starting to, up here on this extreme row here, I think my battery's going flat on the laser, you know, add more and more things on top, and it's just, it's not as portable when you're starting to connect things back together, and some adapters on top of that as well. So I'm needing to upgrade my rack, and I want it easy to take on the road, but I also want it not taking up too much space in this studio. I've got a fairly small space in here. It's quite a mess at the moment, as you can probably see around me, all this stuff on the desk. I've been on vacation. Well, I haven't been on vacation. I've been on holidays, but I've been in New York City, didn't get very far. But on holidays with the family. So now back in the studio, and I'm gonna be cleaning all this up and upgrading the rack. So I want something that is permanently in the studio, but then when I need to go to a job, can just roll on out of there. And so I think that's also weighing up against, are you doing jobs locally, like you driving somewhere, or are you putting it on an airplane? So I'll start by sort of going through what I've got at the moment and what I'm thinking of, and then some of the racks, and we'll sort of jump around a bit. So to kick off, let's take a look at this. This is my current 4U rack that I was showing you before. It's been a really neat design because you got this on top, you can put this laptop there, and there's some holes coming up out of that sort of carpeted section. So it's something I like, and I think I'm probably going to keep it as a secondary rack and really just build it around an atem extreme ISO, because I really love the functionality of the atem extreme ISO. And there's times where I don't need to take a 2ME Constellation to a job. I just need a couple of inputs and recording and that kind of stuff. So this rack will still be in use and has served me well. And so this is the sort of case where it's got wheels, so you can easily roll it out without having to put it into like on a dolly or something like that. So it's easy to move around, but it doesn't take up too much space. Where am I? Jump over here. So currently the layout of it looks a bit like this. So the front of it has a patch bay, it's got the web presenter, it's got the, what do you call it? Hyperdeck, the 2ME Constellation, and then it's really like a power strip there with some switches. They're always just kind of left on, but it gives me the option of turning off certain units if I don't need them, or if I'm just programming and I just want one device on. But I don't really use that. It's more of like a power strip. And then internally is a power conditioner that you can't see. It's like sort of mounted internally. And then on the back side, you can see all these connections that I've got here at a PoE plus Netgear switch, which is running a lot of like the cameras and powering the adapters and all that kind of stuff. But over time, as I've been adding more and more things to this studio, we've got devices that are kind of peripheral to the rack itself and have been sitting on top, like additional bidirectional converters, because I always need more HDMIs in from computer sources, or smaller cameras like the tail airs that come in through HDMI. And more recently, which I'll do a separate video on, I've added the M4 Mac Mini Pro to this. And so this is now has a dedicated heart, which is companion to run it, and 3 HDMI outputs for graphics and teleprompter and video playback through VLC. So that all needs to be integrated into this rack, and I need more space. So I'm gonna just jump out of that one. I'll come back to this in a second, and we can take a look at some of the racks and sort of the housing that I've been thinking through about how to put this together. So lots of spreadsheet stuff here, but I'll start by jumping into this one. So this is what I currently have, which is about 15 inches deep. So a lot of what I'm looking to as well is not just like how many rack units high we're stacking, but how deep it is, because that can affect things like, do you have easy access to the ports at the back, or do you need to add in a patch bay, stuff like that. So this one's about 15 inches that I've got at the moment. Like I said, it's been a good rack, and I will keep this. It also comes in a smaller size, but you know, probably going to be running out of space pretty soon with that one. All right, next rack we're looking at is this molded fly rack. What's interesting about these racks is they sort of get the best of two worlds here, which is that when you are on location or in a studio, these racks are very minimal frames, so they don't take up much space. So I like the idea of this one for in my studio here. It doesn't like bulk out too much into the room. The downside is that you have to store that case somewhere, which it feels like sort of redundant space, particularly here in New York City, where really every square inch or cubic inch is really accounted for. Like every cubic inch in New York City, you're paying rent on. So it's all got to be working for it. And I do have like shelves that I can stack up high and get some of those things out of the way, but it seems, I don't know, seems a little redundant. But the good thing about these cases are low profile once you're on location, and then there's a lot of padding here. So they're kind of like, they're ready to go on an airline if you are sort of doing jobs where you need to travel with that. I've never actually taken like bigger cases on an airline, so I don't know what is involved in terms of weight issues, or if that would just get like crazy expensive, or some of those logistics. A lot of what I'm doing is driving distance, you know, down to DC or Boston, or like that kind of sort of, you know, 4 hours from New York City, or else sort of jobs in New York City. So I'm doing a bit more like local work with that. And then if I do have to fly to like the West Coast, it's probably taking pieces of gear and putting things back together, depending on the job size, or renting things locally. So next one is same sort of thing, but this one's much deeper. So this is like a 20-inch depth. And these cases are just getting really big as well. But they do still have wheels. This one's got double wheels. And, you know, they're also getting more expensive, you know, up to sort of $700. So there's that one. What else am I looking at? And then if you want to go really serious, you can get these shock mount rack cases. You know, they're getting upwards of $1,000, I think, once you get into the 16 RU. Like, these are like big units, and they have this shock mounting here, so it's very sort of secure for your gear. But the downside of that is, you know, for me having it permanently in the studio, that is a really big unit to have. So I've sort of not gone that route, but that is an option that you could look at. Then on the cheaper, smaller end of things is probably something like, for what I've been looking at, is like this, maybe this 10U one here. So you're back down to sort of $300. This is the sort of housing where you don't get as much protection. Like, I don't think you'd really want to throw this on an airline and just take your chances on that. This is more like if you're putting it into your vehicle, or some production vehicle that you can control the environment of, and you're kind of, giving it a little bit of respect as you load it in and out of places rather than just checking into an airline and sort of hoping for the best to come out on the other end. But the good thing about this is it's pretty lightweight shell. So for something that's sitting permanently in this room, it's not bulking up too much. And also and I'll get into this in a bit, but the components that I'm trying to put into a rack unit, I really need around 10 ROU from the audio point of view, which I'll show you in a bit. And it's just starting to get a bit big, I think. I think once going over about 8 rack units, it's getting bulky. And so I'm wondering about sort of splitting it into 2 rather than having 1. All right. So speaking of 8U, there's this Gator 1, which looks okay. That's an option there. It's just got, it's got wheels, it's got sort of pull-out handles. Some of the reviews say this handle is not the strongest. Maybe some of the latches too, but that's similar sort of one. This one has got, the wheels permanently there. There's some other options that don't have the wheels there. So let's take a look at those. And then, so now we come to the 2 that I'm really sort of weighing up here. One is this one, which is SKB R series. This is a shallow rack. So the depth is, I saw it somewhere. I think it might've been on Sweetwater. I think it's about 13 inches. Sorry, 11.75. So this is a much shallower rack. And the advantage of that is that all of your ports are pretty accessible on the back. So for things like the atem 2ME Constellation HD, which is around about 9 inches, you're gonna have a little bit of space at the back, and that's gonna work really well for being able to access those SDI ports without having to reach sort of too far into a rack. And then it just reduces the overall size and bulk. And this one, you can see the wheels are still part of it, and then the sides come off. So you've got a bit of extra bulk on the sides there, but also comes in a 4U and a 6U and an 8U. So I think I need an 8 for what I'm upgrading from. So that's one that I'm looking at. I kind of like the shallowness of that for the video rack. And then there's one that's not a shallow depth, but is sort of similar. And what's interesting about this one is the wheels are actually on the back, so they kind of break away. And so this unit doesn't take up too much space when it's sort of sitting permanently here in the studio, and I can take the wheel side off and sort of stash that. You'll see the wheels here, a little bit longer on the wheel side, and then it's in this sort of form factor that you can wheel away. So I am weighing up this one, and maybe even getting 2 of these, so 2 8 RUs for a 16U capacity, and then these ones would stack nicely on top of each other. So when they're sitting here, they're just in the corner stacked, and then when they're on location, one would be video, one would be audio, so we can sort of separate it out a bit. Let me see, let's come back here. We'll take a little question here. Winston says, just returned a R104, came cracked and quality wasn't good. Got the rolling 8U Gator instead. Good to know. Where are we? Let's go in order here. Let you know be heard says, I've also heard that the airlines won't cover checked gear, but haven't validated that statement. I think I'm going in the wrong order here. One of my worries with flypacks is the ability to lock them with an actual lock. Yeah, I think like transporting gear through an airline is never fun to begin with. It's always a bit of stress of like, even if it's not damaged, like is it gonna arrive on location, particularly if you're going for a job which has a sort of short lead time, and if they lose your bags for a day or 2, that could really throw a wrench in a job. So I'm probably steering away from having to take all this equipment on an airline. and just focusing on local jobs where I can control it. And then I think if I had a really big job somewhere on the West Coast, I would probably rent the gear or sort of work with a local vendor for the gear rather than transporting it across the country, because it does get really heavy. Like if you look at the regular 50 pounds that you can have with a check-in luggage, the cases themselves are often 30 or 40 pounds. So there's like, you're not really gonna have any space to put the gear in there. Ethan says, have you seen the patch panels with hinges? They are fantastic for being able to check connections without tearing the whole faceplate off. No, I haven't seen those ones. Patch panels with hinges. I'll have to send a link to that. I'd be interested to see that. I also see this guy for having a mini for running content, one for recording, streaming, and one for something else. That's what I'm leaning towards, is like a smaller portable one. And that's what I've done also in the past with just taking the Extreme, or even like maybe the Mini Pro if it's really small, although the Extreme's kind of nice because of the dual USB-C for recording and output, and also super source. So it's kind of hard to get away from that. All right, so they're my two cases, and let's come back to just taking a look at the equipment that we're going to put into these two cases. And I've got two sections here. One is the video equipment and one is the audio equipment. So starting with the video equipment, I sort of made a list of everything. Like in green is like the things that I have already, and then the other things that I'm thinking of sort of adding or playing with it. I'll go through this in the slide deck because that's a little nicer to look at. Okay. Okay, so 10U. This is kind of my, not my dream rack, but if I imagined an all-in-one rack that I would like to travel with that is still really a brain. Like the way that I put these racks together is it's a brain processing unit, and then the monitors and laptops and really like Stream Decks is what it's built around. Being able to switch all this is external. So I'm not too much worried about monitors, although it can be handy to have monitors if you need to check something in a pinch. So we've got basically sort of a 2-unit Feel World with 3 monitors there, and that runs 3G SDI. I think it takes 4K HDMI as well, if you're sort of semi-future-proofing it for 4K. I've already got these 2 units, so the Constellation HD and the hyperdeck and the web presenter, as I showed you earlier. So I've got those, and I bought these ones in 4K again just for future-proofing. It was another couple $100, and I feel like I'll just use it until they die, which they hopefully won't. And then a Stream Deck Studio in here for switching to be able to sort of control everything at the panel. And then the big beast in here is really the Behringer wing rack. And I've gone back on this so many times because there was a long period of time where I was getting very close to buying the M32C. So that's the sort of the equivalent of the X32, but it's like a Midas core. So it's just like a 1U unit, which would be really nice and small and could sort of sit in there. But I feel like given that these wings are, I said the future, I mean, the M32Cs still work, but the wings are a lot more modern in their design and menus and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm leaning more towards the wing rack, but all of this stuff has been out of stock for a long time, and then it'll come back into stock and you got to jump on it. So I was waiting for the M32 for ages, and then by the time it came back on stock, I was like, I'll get the wing, and now they're both out of stock. So it might be a couple of months before this comes in. But this has really been the thing that has thrown me in this, because I don't want audio to take up so much space in this rack as a sort of central brain processing. I'd rather have like a stage box somewhere else and just have like the core processing in this rack, and then have a sort of networked audio panel for an audio engineer to sit somewhere alongside that. But you know, the wings are about $1,600, and there's a ton of capacity and value in them, so it's kind of hard to sort of pass that up. And then down the bottom is just like a patch bay that I currently have. I have 2 patch bays that I've spent a fair amount of money on, and so I can sort of readapt them. They're not exactly like this, they're very sort of custom. But that would be my kind of 10U rack. Oh, this was like a rejigging. So which one was this one? This was the original one, and then I thought, well, actually, I probably want the Stream Deck closer to the monitors, because you're probably watching that, so I just sort of flip that around. And then the Behringer here, and it's got a tiltable screen, so you want that above any sort of patch bay or cables coming out the bottom. So it's just sort of thinking on the front end of things, how all these have stacked so it's a good user experience on the front side. But the challenge also is the backside. And so the way that I often design racks is just sort of in an Excel spreadsheet. And I basically have 3 cubes per unit. So it's 1.75 inches, which I think that's, if I resize the row, it's 58 pixels, roughly. So roughly 58 pixels, and then 58 across as well, just so that I can spatially get a sort of sense of this. And I basically build this one out. So I've got vertically here, I've got up to 8 units. You know, I was looking at like, what if I went to 10 or 12? And then looking at the depth here, so that shallow rack that we were looking at before, that is 11 point something. So it's around about here is where that case would end, as opposed to this one is where the deeper one ends, and where my current one ends, and then the other one, I can't remember, it's on another one, it's probably around about here that it has. So you've got to look at like the different depth that you're going to play with, and are you trying to put anything on the backside? Because, and I'm usually trying to put something on the backside just to have all the cables coming out of the back and to make the front tidy and just sort of consolidate that. So as you can see here, if you look at the wing, that is going to be too big for this shallow bay, so that's frustrating. Because it would just be like a little bit wider, and then it'd be like a really good fit. And then this one I currently have is obviously too small because I've only got like a 4RU. So, you know, if I grabbed the whole wing and moved it up into here, it would basically take up the whole box. And then, you know, I could do that, but I feel like I probably want some microphones and stuff in there. So that's where I start. And then I was looking at what if I did this short side. So this is that shorter rack. Again, you got the monitors, Stream Deck Studio, Constellation takes up quite a bit of space. The hyperdeck and web presenter, patch bay, and just gonna add a power conditioner in here. One of the things I do is I use the Extreme as sort of like an ISO recorder. And so that ideally sits close to the Constellation, so that I can just patch through 8 to 10 SDI cables. From a heat point of view, probably want to keep an eye on that because they're probably the 2 hottest devices, are like the Extreme and the Constellation. And so they would fit, and I just really am going to get that Extreme and slot it in so we can't actually access any buttons. It's just going to be fully, I wonder if I've got a shot of this. Do I have a shot of this? I don't. Multi-view. It's off the page. Let me see if I can just pull this one up. So no, I've got a shot of this somewhere. Rack. Let me go. Okay, there we go. Rack. Okay, this is what I'm looking at here. So you can see the Extreme is sitting on top at the moment. I literally never press a button on that. It just sits there. So I'm like, the plan was always to have it slotted inside. It's just been handy having it on top because it has tons of ventilation, and I also have it on a a vented shelf to raise it up, because I think they really suffer from heat. So you gotta be careful with that. But I want to get that off and in and sort of like tidy all that up. So that's where the extreme would go on the backside, and then I've got my sort of converters and my Mac Mini and my switches, but then moving this around, the side part of the video rack would be, this would be the big one. So obviously there's a lot more space here if I'm putting shelving on the back for the Mac Mini and the network switches, and I've got a 10 gigabit network switch as well now that I run for editing, and then converters down the bottom. So it's just trying to like think about what's on the front side so that it looks nice and it's easy to use, and then on the back side that they all line up. So that was the video side deep. This is probably what I'm leaning towards, just because it gives a bit more flexibility for running out of space, you know, because there's always like some USB-C power block that you need to put in, and you know, you run out of space very quickly. And also, just given that this wing, that the audio unit is probably gonna have to be the deep one, I might just make them symmetrical across the board. But I was looking at just, I probably could fit that into this shallow one. Let's go back to here, shallow rolling rack. So this one, yeah, I could probably fit them all into this rack if I go to here, lay them out in this kind of arrangement. So let's jump back to our slideshow here. So we've got our 10U, and then I just started going through and like thinking, if I want to limit it to 8 units, what does that entail? Let's make sure I'm part here. So I always like the idea of a pull-out screen, but these pull-out screens are really deep. They're like 20 inches often, so it's probably not the space there to have that, and it also takes up the whole depth across. Power conditioner, again, I also like the idea of putting it up high so you can have the little lights down, but again, I don't really need that, and sometimes from an internal point of view, it's easier having those power bricks more on the bottom, just in terms of where all the cabling goes. So that was my 8U, and I was looking at the back side of what I need to fit in there, and let me just get rid of my face so you can see both of these. This is putting more of the networking up the top, but then I had the converters up the top as well over here, and that's just a lot of cables up and down. So I figured all of the cabling I'm trying to get lower down and more consolidated. So I went this route, got rid of the screen, put the fan on the front. At the moment, I've got the fan on the back side, but I kind of like seeing the temperature, and it's just sort of, you know, easier to keep an eye on all of that. And I think this is where I landed. So far, this is where I'm up to, which is fan on the front, maybe getting screens if I, you know, want to spend another $500, $600 on these things, but that can wait. And the Stream Deck Studio in there, Constellation, and then the power and the patch bay on the bottom, and then networking things up the top here. I've got a router externally at the moment, so I want to put that in the rack. The PoE port, Mac Mini probably up there. I've got a cloud store. So a bunch of like computer networking type stuff here, which would generally always be on. The PoE switch powers down when I switch off the studio, because that switches off some of the converters and the cameras and things like that. And then coming down here, we've got the Extreme next to the Constellation. I maybe would try and space it out just internally so they're not sitting directly on each other for heat. And then down the back, you see these, on the side view, they start to overlap, but if you saw the cross-section before it, there's space between them. But having all of these, I need to get additional converters because I've got 6 at the moment, and I'm just running out of ports, and I've got some duplicators here and NDI converters and a DMX converter. So I'm thinking this bottom row would be all of that, and so that would be the video rack. And then from the audio point of view, this is a bit more in progress because it's not even in stock yet, but probably getting the Behringer wing in its own case. Maybe at some point some Sennheiser microphones. I've got some other ones that I can probably use at the moment, power conditioner block, and maybe a stage one. I don't necessarily need that necessarily at the moment, but if I did have it, I would have it accessible at the front with screws that could be just popped out. So if I wanted to run that as a stage box rather than sort of front side ports, then I could do that. So it's kind of where I'm landing with those. That's my kind of design so far. Oh, let's get my iPad here. Yes, I need to clean up here. Let me just get away from this. Okay, what else we got? Questions here. OlympusNet, great to have you here, joining from Greece. And Nils, hello to you as well. And g'day to Gwen in San Francisco. Thanks for joining. Good to be back in the chair. We've got Michael, good evening and Happy New Year. Okay, Ethan says they come in 16 and 24 port variants. I like the fit of the 24 port ones, but certain keystones won't fit side by side properly. So I've ended up going through different brands for HDMI, USB, and audio. Yeah, I've got one through, I can't remember, it was Red something. On my channel years ago, I had some custom panels that I'm still using, and I can switch them out too. So let me see if I've got this one. See if I can move this one away. I'm talking about down here. I can probably unplug this camera and get right in here. Yeah, so this is where all my HDMI is coming out, and I could repatch that for network or SDI or that kind of stuff. And then if I come around the front, oh, there we go. There's another patch bay on there, which is probably a little bit difficult to show you, but I'll get that one back up. So I could sort of reconfigure that, and some of them I don't actually need. I could probably have fewer cables on the front because I'm not really using the front side panel. It's meant for easy access when I go to a gig, but you know, day to day, I want everything coming out the back because it's much cleaner. The fans of my 2ME Constellation makes a lot of noise when next to two hyperdeck studios. Yeah, there's a fair amount of noise coming through here. I go quiet for a little bit, and you could test it out. I've got a bit of a gate on this microphone, but this is my 416, which is probably 5 feet from the unit, so it's pretty close. Pointed other direction, obviously, and then I've got sort of sound treatment around here to deaden the space a bit, but I'll stop speaking for a bit and see if you can hear the rack noise coming through. Let me know what you think of that. That is, yeah, it's right here. So when I'm doing gigs, I'm usually in a different room and it's not so much of a problem. If I had more space here in the studio, I'd probably put it in a whole nother closet, and then you could just add in more things. I do have a fan in the rack that I turn off when I'm live streaming for an hour, just because the fan can get pretty loud. TecMojo has a 9-switch PDU that would let you reset things individually versus banks of power going down from one accidental button press. That'd be cool. I think I've been looking for power, what's the word? So at the moment I use, so in the studio for power management, I'm using the, I'm totally forgetting this, what am I calling it? The Kaza power strips. I did something on this recently. And they've been great. They're very reliable, and I've got an iPhone app that means I can turn the studio on and off remotely, and also means when I come in, I can just power up the things that I want to. So if I'm doing programming, I can just turn on the rack unit, but leave all the lights off, you know, just have house lights, so I'm not having all those sort of studio lights. And equally, when I leave the studio, it can sort of go out. But they're kind of more domestic plugs, like I think you can see it down the side here. Let me get my finger in here, this one down here. So that is powering things, and it means I can reset things. So even like when I'm remote, I can come back to here. When I'm not in the studio, for example, if the Mac Mini had a problem, I could kill the power, so like crash it, and then it would reboot itself. You know, so if I did get to that point where it froze for some reason, I can remotely repower it. So I quite like that unit. I would love to see some sort of one new unit which has probably an Ethernet port in it rather than Wi-Fi, so that you could remotely turn switches on and off. I really like Ubiquiti for the networking part of things, partly because their VPN it's so easy to get into. I've never quite understood VPNs. Like I've always found them kind of complicated. Like even I've got a ton of the GL-iNet routers, and there must be, you know, some way of getting into them, making them work. But it was the Ubiquiti VPN that I just, you know, you click a button and it sends you a file, and then your computer's verified. And so now I can be at home and I can just fire up the VPN, and then I'm back in the studio and I can turn on everything, and I can do programming, or I could run a whole live stream remotely. And so that's been really, really neat. But and then you can power cycle their ports in the you know, you go in the back end, but it's very finicky, and you can't put things on schedules. It's really just like a power cycle manually. So I feel like there's a lot of potential there for PoE ports to be individually reset and stuff like that. Because it'd be great to have, like at the moment with my Netgear PoE port, I turn that whole thing off, and that's all studio connected devices. So, you know, the cameras turn off, and the, you know, the DMX PoE in turns off, and the Stream Deck studios turn off, that kind of stuff. But it'd be good if you could group the ports that you wanted to, and then kill the PoE for that, and then also for AC power to turn off certain units. So I would love to see more of that. But I haven't found that device yet, one that's like small and that kind of stuff. Let me see. Pobut. I don't think I got that right. I'm going to say Pobut and Crackerbox. I prefer the patch bay in the middle in my small portable rack. Makes cable lengths shorter overall. I guess you're talking about from the patch bay, because then you can have devices that go in and out. Sometimes I find like just running cables across and then through the side just clears it, because I do get a bit of this cables running, like water falling down, and then you're trying to get a cable across, and it becomes a real bird's nest, as I was showing you over here on this bird's nest, which I'm gonna clean up, and it's gonna look beautiful, and then everything will be in control. You know, this is control of our lives in inside of the rack. Kevin says, most organized, disorganized desk. Are you providing video services to clients, or is this just an informational channel? Excellent videos, by the way. Yeah, so my desk, normally I try to keep this as much wood as possible. Just kind of, I'm even like on my, let's have a look here at this desk, because there's a ton of stuff that we do not want here. Scissors and mints, and these things I'm still trying to, the Stream Deck Studios, I'm working on how to mount them. I'm thinking maybe under the monitor here is accessible. This whole, this is my audio mixer at the moment that the Behringer wing will replace. And so I want to get that off the desk. Yeah, everything's just like building up, because I've, you know, it was end of year, had a bunch of shoots, and was reconfiguring some smaller racks for jobs, and then end up with cables, and so now I've gone to Amazon and I have a ton of these bags that are going to bring peace and harmony to my life with, so all labeled with like, these are like patch cables, you know, like SDI, HDMI, USB-A to C, USB-C, like all that kind of stuff. I need to get these into bags because it's a stuff everywhere, and I need to throw out some stuff, get rid of some stuff. So yes, this desk would normally be cleaned, and I will clean that up. But your other question about providing video services to clients, or is this an informational channel? So the majority of my work is as a video director and producer. That's really produced content. So it's like brand films, commercials, testimonials, that kind of stuff. And increasingly it's been like live streaming, live events, that kind of thing. And also increasingly it's been building studios for clients. So I've had some big studios that I've built all of this kind of stuff for. You know, if you want to have a podcast, my particular bent is how to automate things as much as possible through companions so that, you know, for example, in a corporate environment, you could have someone come in and press a button on a Stream Deck, and it would just run the same show and then change the show, and it would just be something that's sort of easy to use. And then even more recently, I've been doing some product design, which has been a lot of fun. Thinking through new like hardware, you know, like ways in which to control live streams. So that's been fun. So that's kind of the facets of what I do, as well as photography. So I do, it's a lot of like architecture and property and that kind of stuff, and headshots and a bit of lifestyle. Yeah, so it's really gotten more and more diverse over the years, which is fun and interesting, and you know, a bit all over the shop. And that's what I do. And also on this channel, so this channel is, I guess it's sort of informational. I try to make it something that you can learn about live streaming, or sometimes like video editing or that kind of stuff. And then the work that I've done on Companion to control live streamings, I also sell some of those like plugin templates on my website that you can purchase to run a Stream Deck and to control the atem and P to Z cameras, and now like Visca cameras and hyperdeck and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's keeping me busy, and what's keeping me up at night is a 2-year-old. Ethan says, it's too bad that the Patchbox are really only designed for 1U devices. They would be great because they're metal. Rackstuds would be great. Quick device swapping without the studs. The Patchbox. What are you talking about? Patchbox, which one's that? I mean, I wish there, you know, the Blackmagic bidirectional converters, like I use a ton of those, and I just wish they would like snap into I think they're a little bit bigger than a 1U rack, but snap into a rack so that they don't jiggle around. I mean, you can put, you know, double-sided snap tape on it, but yeah, to have them like in a rack secure, but then also be able to take them out if you need to switch up the configuration, because sometimes I want to run a long SDI cable out to a room and then convert it back to HDMI to get it into a TV or something like that. So I wish that was much easier to do. Michael says, can you say some thoughts about the TV Studio 4K compared to the Constellation or the other atems? I bought one, but still unsure if it was the right decision. It's been a while since I've looked at the TV Studio 4K. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right unit here. TV Studio 4K. you talking about the whole, let me just see if I can bring this one up. Oops, TV, that's why it's not working. TV, Studio 4K atem. Yeah, I thought you were talking about, if you're talking about this one, okay. I'm assuming you're talking about this one. Otherwise it's a box. I haven't owned this one, but this to me seems kind of like an atem extreme with recording, that kind of stuff, with a sort of control panel on top. Like, I've really gone the route of stream decks and that kind of stuff, because I feel like eventually when I'm actually doing a show, like, I don't want to just switch buttons. I want to create macros which are going to switch a channel and play a video, or, you know, change 4 different inputs and change audio cues and that kind of stuff. So I've really sort of built everything around Companion, and I'm very happy with running it on a stream deck for shows, and I feel like that's very secure. So I never really went this route. Also for me, that's like a larger thing to transport. Depends what you do. I would say it's a great all-in-one device for, you know, small venues or conferences and that kind of stuff. So it's very capable. What I do like about the Constellation is the routing that's in there. The one I've got is this one. So on the back here, you've got, let me see if I go up here. You've got 24 inputs and 12 outputs. And over the years, I've found that many inputs I haven't used them all yet, but they've been really handy, because I can do things like run graphics, and eventually I'll run graphic fill into it when I get that device. Like teleprompter in there, like getting things like a teleprompter in there is, you don't really think about, it's not just like getting the teleprompter to the the talent. It's also, you know, having the teleprompter in a little square on your multi-view, so you can kind of follow along with a script. So being able to route video all sorts of places is very handy. And the way that I have set up mine is, well, I'm going to reroute it a bit, but it's going to be the first 8 outputs basically go into the extreme. So it's like an 8-track recorder. And then the other 4 inputs are, I've got 1 going into the web presenter, which is what you're looking at. And then I have 3 in the studio, which I've got like a floor monitor up here, that's what I'm looking at. And then I've got a confidence monitor on the teleprompter just below it. And then in the teleprompter, I've got another screen, which is usually the program feed, just because I'm switching, I want to be able to look at you and make sure I'm showing you the right thing, rather than like talking about something on a monitor and like on a computer screen and not showing you that. So that's the way that I route that. So I definitely like the Constellation. And if you are more confident in terms of putting together racks and routing things, like, you know, these are all SDI cables. So every one of these needs a little SDI patch cable from, you know, the hyperdeck to this one, and output, and even like the multi-view out on this, it's got 2 multi-view outs and SDI, but unlike the Extreme, you can't route it internally, so you have to get a SDI patch cable for a foot, and like, so I've put out multi-view 1 into input 19 and number 2 into 20, and then that gives me the ability to route the multi-view out of any of the other outputs that I want to floor monitors, or even to the live stream to sort of demo something with you. So I would, I bought the Constellation before that came out, but I would still buy the Constellation again. Let me pull back here. All right, so noise tests. Hardly any noise. Didn't really notice any rack noise, so that is great. Good to hear. Let me see how the rack noise is. No. That's good. I can show you what I've done on that. If I can bring up my screen again. Where are we? So under here, this is my atem software. Let me just hide that. So again, like part of the whole audio remake, what I want to do with getting 16 U's of rack in here is to get the Behringer wing, and then all the audio will be processed in an audio mixer, as opposed to at the moment, it's a bit of, you know, microphones and certain things are processed on my external mixer, and then the master of that is fed into the TRS input on the Blackmagic, and then the show music comes in through HDMI. You can see here, this 8M3, this input 8, Mac Mini input 3, is what is playing the show music, so that's mixing in through there. So, you know, the final mix is happening in the atem, which is not ideally the way I want to do it. But on the TRS, I've got equalizer, so I guess that's, if I turn that off, that is how that sounds. And then I've got dynamics, which has probably the main thing is the expander. So if I think now, expander and compressor, now you should probably be able to hear the rack noise. So I'll just be quiet for a bit. All right, I'm gonna turn back on my compressor and my expander and my equalizer. This is one of those things that I've like set up a while ago and then just go up to here and go save startup state. And now every time that I do a show, it's got those settings on it, and I've got a ton of makeup gain here of 11 decibel. So that is what's being applied to the microphone inputs here. And, you know, like the downside of doing it this way is it's not very isolated. So if I was doing an interview in the studio, you know, both mics would be coming into that deck. And then once it comes to the atem, you know, all of that compression is applied to the whole group rather than separating it out. So yeah, that's part of what I'm getting away from. All right, we're gonna wrap up soon. Let me see if I can just power through some of these questions as much as possible, and then I'm gonna be spending my afternoon tidying this up so that I can see you guys next week with a cleaner desk. I'm just running, I've got a 10 gigabyte switch that I put in under the desk and it's generating some heat. All right. Engenius and Cyberpower have cloud and probably locally controllable power distribution units. I'll check them out. Firewall has replaced Ubiquiti in my networks. And with the inexpensive Firewall MSP, I can mesh my travel router with my home and office studio and access devices by name across the networks. I reckon you should make a video on this. I'd love to see that. So make a video of that and shoot me a comment and I'll watch it, because I'm curious to see that, because I've definitely been buying more and more Ubiquiti devices. I've got their like cameras and I've got their Dream router, and I'm about to move the Dream router to home and get probably like the Gateway Max or something to put into the rack. So and again, that's really to do with the ease of use and the VPN of using that. And PoE control via SNMP with a companion is on my list to implement with my Aruba instant on switches this year. Cool. Like this review, I'm not saying I heard the noise in the stream. My suggestion is to put a 1U between the 2ME and the EC and the hyperdeck. Yeah, I probably, that's the other thing about like the 4U that I have at the moment is it's quite compact. And so getting 8U, I just want to space them out a bit. There's like some permanent converters that are on the floor of the rack that are like taped down, which have been great. It's been serving me well, but I would kind of like to bring them a bit more towards the front so that I can have fewer patch cables and just switch them out if I need to without having to like dig down into the rack. So it's part of part of that. My biggest issue with Rackstuds has been in a network rack with a locking door. You have to be careful to keep the front rail back far enough from the door that they don't hit it when it closes. That'd be a good thing for me to test out. And I mean, one of the things I like about B&H is usually where I buy all of my stuff from is they've got a really great return policy. They're also like, you know, a 5-minute cycle away from here. So I don't have to box up stuff. I can just, depending on the size of it, dump it in the front of a city bike and take it over to returns. And so that's been great to those sort of scenarios where you go like, oh, this is the rack that I want. And then you get it and you kind of go, wait, it doesn't have enough space for it to close with all of the cables still sticking out. So that's definitely something I'll have to think about as I go along. On Etsy, there are sellers that have made some awesome expandable holders for the Blackmagic and other converters. I have seen one that is probably a bit too, I don't know if it's overpriced. I think it's Black Rack. Let me see if I can bring this one up. My custom shop. I think it's this one. Yeah. So it looks like there's two here. One is this one. So it's like one new, and then these what do you call them? Holes? Like those lines. I mean, I think it's about 16 converters that you could stack vertically, like so. And usually all of these have these little, like if you can zoom right in here, there'll be 2 screws that kind of hold the box together. So I guess you just need to find a slightly longer screw that could go through the rack, or maybe they're long enough, and then you're sort of solidly in place. Again, it's one of those things where, just say I've got 6 to 8 bidirectional converters in a rack, and I want them there, but then I get to a shoot and I go, actually, I don't want to convert it here. I need to get 2 converters 100 feet away. I kind of want to like rip them out, and you know, so that's where you sort of back to double-sided tape. But I'm also looking at this rack, this Black Rack too, because that looks interesting from being able to just kind of stack things and actually like screw them in, like hard bolt them in so they're not rattling around. $124 for that one. And then the other one is this one, which I think would be more flatter. So that would be one new rather than like taking up 2.5 or something. And looks like you would do it on the side, depending on how much. Maybe this would take 4 of them. For some of the bigger ones, like a streaming bridge or something, might take 1 and then 2, 3, 4. Or if you had some smaller ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that. Is another one, $84. So, you know, it's all money. Michael really wants to go 4K, but do miss the ISO, do not like the size, and now use the atem Extreme as an ISO recording device. I hear ya. I have got bits and pieces of 4K gear. I've got some Canon cameras that are, you know, they've got the, you know, they brand them as 4K and they're 4K HDMI out, but then it's 3G SDI. So, you know, you're going to be converting HDMI to SDI, and then, I don't know. It's quite a few thousands of dollars to upgrade. Like the Constellation that I'm running is, I think it's $1,600, $1,700 versus the same model in 4K is like 3.5 or something. So it's like double the money. Plus, I already have one, so I'd have to like sell that and buy the new one. 4K is nice, but when it comes to live streaming, I think like most people aren't doing that. I mean, I'm live streaming this in 4K, I guess partly just because on my YouTube channel, I try to like push the boundaries of what I can do technically to, you know, so I'm across some of the pitfalls of different streaming rates and stuff like that. So, you know, I've got, I guess technically 4K cameras that are 3G SDI processed and then into a web presenter 4K, and it's outputting that in UHD to YouTube, which hopefully is giving a better picture experience. We'll see, you know. So, and then the file size is a real thing. So with the, I have my live stream set up so that when I go live, I'm recording a local copy in ISO, and there's, you know, 4 cameras and some video inputs and all that. So I probably end up with 250 gigabytes per 1 hour of live stream. And then once a month, I sort of go through that hard drive and I trash what I don't think I would need. You know, if it's because I guess sometimes I'm like, maybe there's bits of an episode that I would want to edit to put onto YouTube. That's a plan. I've never had the time to do that. And then I've toyed with the idea of like hiring an editor, and I haven't quite got that up to speed yet either. So I have all of this footage just sitting there, which becomes many terabytes of footage. And so one of my projects this year is that now that I have the Mac Mini M4 in the rack and it's just on as a studio server, and I've got Resolve in there as a project server, I'm gonna be getting those DJF live streams and basically batch converting them to like H.265 at like 3 megabit, so that I don't know, I archive everything, and I hate the idea of needing some footage that you know, it's probably, you know, these sort of live streams aren't a work of art, and it's probably just enough that I would just archive this program streaming one, you know, like 6 megabit that comes off the what would otherwise be streamed on the Extreme. But that's what I thought about, because Black Friday every year I usually buy more hard drives and stuff, and I just thought this year I'm like, you know what, I've got quite a few terabytes that are being occupied by old live streams that I could just trash and save space, but you never know. And so maybe I'm just gonna like down convert them, and you know, I don't think the loss quality would be that significant for what it is, and it'd be much smaller space. That's my other part of that. What do we got? Ethan says, depending on how many ISO streams you'll need, the Pro ISO can be mounted side by side with a few sizes of Stream Deck or the hyperdeck shuttle. I never got into the hyperdeck shuttle, I think because I was really trying to get more rack mounted stuff. And again, for me, it's going back to the idea of building a brain, something that's very centralized, got short patch cables. I mean, even part of what and I'll go into this in future weeks or whatever this year, is my Mac Mini that is now the heart and soul of the studio running companion is headless. So it's on, and it's gonna live in the rack, and it's got 3 video outputs, but there's no keyboard or mouse control. I'm just going through, you can see here, this is the Mac Mini screen that's running, and that is just, what do you call that? Screen sharing on the Mac. So, you know, every Mac computer has this already inbuilt. It's not software that you have to download. It's already part of Apple, and it's fairly easy to manage that remotely. I've had a few quirks setting it up. Like, for example, if you're going to do this, don't turn on File Vault, because if you reboot your computer, you can't log in remotely until you authenticate it locally. So anyway, don't turn on File Vault if you want to run a remote computer, is what I've started to understand. But I've, you know, what used to happen was my main laptop, which is actually under the desk here, is running these screens, and then it would run the computer monitor that you would, like this screen, copy of the screen, into the rack, and it would run VLC, and it would run H2R graphics. And now all of that is internal in the rack, and there's no video link between where I'm sitting and the rack. So that means that it's just, there's fewer video cables, and it's really just controlled across the network. So I can jump onto H2R either on, so my iPad is what I'm looking at, H2R on your comments here, or else I can go onto the web and then I can control that sort of across the web, just over a web browser. Like I can take your comment off like that. So it's really going network. Is the future of things, I think everything's network, which will be interesting to see as Blackmagic gets into the, what do you call it, turn on 10 versus NDI and some of that kind of stuff. Yeah, the future is networking, I think. All right, Michael, thanks for the explanation. You are welcome. I love Rack Solutions and some of their kit, but their portable server cases are crazy priced. I'll have to check them out. Drop a link if you want me to, I'll take a look. And Ethan says, I've gone insane with the magnets and M234 screws to stick things to shelves and then move them around. Oh, right, sorry, I'm thinking Mac Minis and you're talking about screw sizes. With magnets and moving things around. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't sure what that's in relation to. But it was making me think about, I do need to find a way to secure my Mac Mini M4 into this rack, which will probably be a mixture of like double-sided, like the 3M, what do you call it? I can't remember the name of it. Like the double hook tape for a bit of grip and then a cable tie. That's probably what I'm going to do into a vented rack. Winston. Hi, Winston. I'm using 4 Studio HD Pluses for 4K ISO, but can only do 4K 30. You know, I think that's fine. I bought the same one, the Studio HD Plus. I don't know why the HD. I guess it's like mainly HD, and the plus is the fact that you can do 4K 30. It's kind of weird branding. I think that's enough. Like, I don't know. Do you need 4K 60? I feel like 4K 30 is enough for live streaming, and it can be a fair bit cheaper, not to mention half a rack rather than like a full rack, and that's quite a bit bigger. Like I've done some installations for clients where I've put in the full rack, you know, 12G or whatever it's called, hyperdeck, like the 4K hyperdecks, and it takes up a lot of rack space. It's a lot of cables, a lot of power cables. It's just, you know, and then are you going to be shooting and archiving everything at 4K 60? Maybe 4K 30 is enough, in which case the rack space is fine. One of the things not that I would want to build this out necessarily because of the cost, I don't like with the extremes that you can't set the bitrate at all. Like the bit rates are really high, and I would be happy for my purposes if the ISOs, rather than being like 70 megabit a second, could just all be 10 or 6. You know, like the streaming high setting is something like, what was it, 6 to 9 megabits. Because then I could have stuff archiving that if I really need it, then I can use it, and the quality is maybe a little more compressed, but over the course of years is not terabytes and terabytes of storage, because all this stuff builds up, you know. And if you're running enterprise things, like that's a whole nother thing of not just the cost of hard drive space, but someone to manage that. Like the fewer gigabytes you shoot, the more you can sort of cache stuff and automate stuff before someone needs to kind of come in and clear it out. So it becomes a lot more maintenance heavy to do that. John has picked up on the noise gate pumping every time you talk. Hopefully not. I know what you mean. I think if you're listening closely, you would hear that. And happy to say that the wing will solve all problems, and we'll have better preamps, and everything will be glorious in the future. Sergio, thanks for adding the Q there. I am streaming upscaled 4K, so it's a HD processed signal that is upscaled. This looks good. That's good to know. I have noticed sometimes when streaming in 4K, YouTube wants me to do it at like 1440p, and the web presenter doesn't do that, and so it hasn't had that in-between resolution between like HD and UHD. So anyway. Ethan, I've been loving the mountable under the desk mounts for the Stream Deck Plus and Razor Loop Deck implementation. Under the desk mounts. Under the desk. Under here? Is it like on the edge of the, like on the, it's funny because I got these Stream Deck Studios and I've been trying to figure out like where to put these. Like one could be here, but then it's a bit kind of like looking down. And then my current solution is I'm working on trying to find a way, because these have M4 holes on top. So I've mounted a cheese plate and then a NATO clamp, and I'm trying to work on a solution to mount this behind the monitor, but it's actually quite heavy. And so securing this down, I don't know. The monitors are rounded, so tape doesn't really stick. Like you can't really stick tape to it, and I haven't found a way to neatly mount that under the monitor, but I think that's my best solution at the moment for mounting that somewhere on the desk, short of like putting a hole in the desk, cutting that in. Yeah, strong magnets might be the best for AV racks, probably true. One caution on Velcro or 3M is that it does add a bit of height to whatever is attached to, so 1U maybe no longer than 1U. That is a good point. It definitely adds a fair bit. So yeah, and then the Mac Mini is 1.25U. I know, so that's where I was like in my rack designs. Where is it? I was thinking this is, my rack, obviously everyone's differs. Let me just get rid of my face so you can see, is I could put something like, so at the moment this Netgear switch I've got like sitting on a rack to the side, but I could actually bring out the rack ears, in which case it would mount somewhere like this, and then maybe it would just sit under like that. And then, I don't know. I feel like there's some of the things that I need to test in person. And I wish it was 1U, that would be neat, but I don't know. Maybe servers will just flip them on their side and have like a 3U solution or something like that. Pierre, great to have you here. Never too late to join, and you can always watch the replay. Gwen says, I don't think I've ever streamed in 4K. I'm often at the mercy of venue internet, so I'd rather send less data. I don't think most of my clients would ever notice if I did 4K. I think that's very valid, and that's the same reason of like, do you need to upgrade your rack to 4K? I mean, probably the main reason to upgrade a rack to 4K is not so much the live streaming, but if you're doing like ISO recording and post-production, like maybe you've got a conference or like some multicam thing where you want to do a post edit and then upload things in 4K. That's probably more of the use case. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think for a client I have yet streamed in 4K. I mean, I do it here on this channel, like I said, just to test the boundaries. So if I had a client who was like, it has to be 4K, I'd be like, okay, well, I feel like I'm comfortable with this kind of bandwidth and, that kind of stuff. But, people more than 4K just want a reliable image, and yeah, you never quite know what you're getting into with venues and any restrictions that they might have on that. Pierre says, why using a Stream Deck rack in a rack far from where you're directing your show? So the design here that I was talking about would be, well, I've got two of them, so it's like trying to put them somewhere. I think I want to put it in the rack because that's the form factor, and it's just the sort of thing of like, if you are getting to location and you're just powering it up straight away and you're not setting up a desk, then you could switch it all at that location. And the same with my initial, where was that? No, I think it was this one. My initial 10U, I had this one, was trying to build a sort of control interface so that you could, without setting up any external monitors or any controls, like basically have a unit that you just power on, and then all of the Stream Deck Studio can do all of the switching and run macros and set up things. And like I would be able to program this to control everything that I needed. And I'd be able to see that in terms of like maybe like a multi-view and a program and a, maybe sort of a monitor from a computer or something. And then down here you have all of like from what I've heard and read on forums, like you could run a show if you needed to off the rack interface. It's not, you don't ideally want to sit there all day, but if you've got like a smaller event and you just need to get up and running, or if you're trying to troubleshoot something, then having that control at the rack is why I would want a Stream Deck Studio in there. But for the majority of what I'm switching is basically built around the Stream Deck XLs, and 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, depending on what I'm switching, or sort of video playback, graphics, that kind of stuff is all happening off the Stream Deck. And because these are, you can place them wherever you want, and there's low profile. So I found the Stream Deck XL is still where I want to be switching a show from, because I can position it around keyboards and monitors. Yeah, part of product designing is like trying to figure out ways to get a better Stream Deck for switching a show that involves, video and PTZ cameras and audio, lighting, that kind of stuff. So, what do we got here? Let me just read this properly. Okay, Michael, here's the fans when the noise gate does not cut away. Yeah, I think you'd probably, I think I turned it all back on. Hopefully I did. We'll see. Pierre, you understand? Excellent. Use a wing audio interface. I'm not sure if you're saying using the wing as an audio interface, but so with again, like if they had a wing core, I would buy that and I would just put that in the rack and then have an external workstation to control it and maybe a stage box. But just given the value for money in a wing, you get a ton of outputs on the back, which, then that's at the rack rather than on the stage, which may not be great, but you can always run a stage box if you need to. Yeah, is sort of centralizing that. But I think eventually, like I was saying, I would have two units, so I've got kind of it's not the right picture here, but, one would be a video rack that might sit next to probably me, because I'm probably switching and directing. And then I'd have an audio engineer, this is the wrong picture, who might be either alongside me or further away, because particularly if you added in Dante or something like that, really all you need is a Ethernet cable between them, or an Ethernet cable and maybe some program audio coming back, depending on how you're setting it up. Gwen says, for Stream Deck Studio, maybe something like Mcfarlane super clamp on a monitor arm, plus a baby quarter mount cheese plate and SD Studio for the Stream Deck Studio on your desk. I like that, and I also like how complicated these things get. Yeah, I'm trying to think with this monitor, like where the arm of this monitor comes in, I need to get a real, like either super clamp or something really solid and some solid arm, because it'd be very easy for this thing to be like pushed askew, and then that kind of defeats the purpose of having an easy to use interface. And then obviously I'm also probably moving the monitor all the time. That's probably going to be a project that's a little bit like my teleprompter. I've got my teleprompter to a great place now where I've got a really nice confidence monitor below it, and I can can angle it like up and down and left and right to direct it where I need to. So that's probably another thing for another day as well. All right, I think that's about it. Thanks for all the questions. It's been great to get all of your questions here, and hopefully some of that helped looking through the rack and things that you'll see here on the channel in the coming year. If there's anything else that you would like to see here on the channel about live streaming or video production, do let me know, because I'm trying to think through what to do with this channel this year and how to make it useful so that you can learn from it and we can learn together, and I can try out new configurations like a 2x8U portable rack unit like we were talking about today. But other things as well, like you can see on the background, I've got a gobo up here, which I've had the mini spotlight zoom from Aperture for many years, and it's just been sitting in a box, and I was using it on a job recently, and I was like, I should just have this up in the studio. So also looking at like maybe getting a proper logo for the show, or the logo, you know, DJF Live on the back wall. So I'm sort of experimenting with that. But these are some of the things that we have in the works. So I don't know. Let me know what you want to see, and if you have any suggestions, yeah, write them in the chat. Time to wrap up, and I gotta get back to cleaning up the studio. Hopefully next time I see you, it will be much tidier, and there'll be the spacious desk. As I said, I just want to see the wood tones rather than this pile of cables and stuff like that. DavidJoshuaFord.com is where you can go to grab profiles and sort of see the other stuff that I've created. All right, happy 2025, and I shall see you next week. Take care.